The decision in 2010 was probably one of the worst decisions of LeBron James' career and one of the most unique things we will ever see. But what got LeBron James to this point? I mean, just earlier in the conference, he's talking about he's thankful of the 6 teams who granted him an offer. What would make him consider 5 other teams in Cleveland? Well, let's do a little rewind. The year is 2002, and the Cavs have only one thought on their mind: be trash, be terrible. Their owner, Gordon Gund, wanted LeBron James so bad that they legit tried to tank to the fullest extent. This season, they went 17-65, which was the worst record in the league by a wide margin. But the Cavs for years were bad. Before this, they even missed on a lot of lottery picks. And, this season, Cavs fans just accepted their fate, and it's losing for LeBron. Whatever you can do to try and get the best chances at LeBron James. So we fast forward to the day of the lottery. Gordon Gund is shaking out of his mind. So goddamn nervous. His team just lost 65 games to try and get LeBron James. And one of Gund's executives tried to talk to him about some of the bigger achievements that he's had in life, like him curing his eye disease, then proceeded to respond, that curing of the disease is about as important as getting LeBron James. Gordon Gund wanted LeBron James to the fullest. Well, fate was on the Cavaliers' side. Once they saw that the Memphis Grizzlies would be picking 2, they knew they had the first pick. The whole city of Cleveland was erupting in excitement. But Gordon Gund, the Cavaliers owner, didn't stop there. After noticing he got the first overall pick in that draft, he took out a new rebranded Cavs, a new logo, a new jersey, and guess whose name was on the back of that jersey? LeBron James. Gordon Gund wanted LeBron more than Gloria James wanted LeBron James. And of course, after getting the first pick, we saw this historical clip of Carlos Boozer and Darius Miles sitting on LeBron James.
We have better players than him in his position already on our team, though. His potential is probably, the sky's the limit for him, though.
I don't think you can really just bring a high school player in and really just think your team gonna really turn around like that. If he come, you know what I'm saying, he can just hop on our bandwagon.
So then the 2003 season comes. LeBron James starts his rookie season, and he's lived up to the hype and then some. Nobody on the Cavs roster thought LeBron James was going to do so well, but he did. And in the first game of the season, they knew they had to do some rebuilding. This roster still had the effects of the previous year in which they went 17-65, and it was still a very ugly roster with very inconsistent scores and just not many good players. Now, in all fairness, in LeBron James' rookie season, he had some very ugly shooting nights where, his shot was just not how it is right now. But he also did some shit that rookies really don't do. He dropped 42 points on the New Jersey Nets, and they come from behind win, and the Nets were good at this point. But in the end of the season, the Cavs would finish with 35 wins and miss the playoffs. So then the offseason comes around, and the Cavs have one thing to do and one thing only: get the hell out of the lottery. So their first point of action was re-signing Carlos Boozer. Carlos Boozer was a rapidly improving power forward and eventually would become an all-star in his career. And he was a second-round pick, so he wasn't making much money. The Cavs needed to make sure that they secure him because he is probably the best help that LeBron has had so far in his career. But here starts stage 1 of the Cavaliers fucking up their own talent. Carlos Boozer was due for an extension. We all know that. So Carlos Boozer and his agent Rob Pelinka met with Gordon Gund, and they did like a handshake agreement, which was not a thing in the NBA that was legal, but it was that they would not pick up his player rights, and they would just try and sign him ASAP on a new deal the very next season. So they committed to a certain amount of money. So then the summer comes along in which that they were supposed to extend Carlos Boozer, and they tried to, but less accomplished big men were getting more money than Carlos Boozer. So he jumps on it. He goes and he signs a 6-year deal with a new team. This was terrible for the Cleveland Cavaliers. In their rookie season, they got rid of LeBron's best help just because they were stupid enough to not pay him immediately. And it wasn't even the end. Carlos Boozer was a very rapidly improving power forward, and Cleveland could have matched that offer of 6 years at $68 million. Yet they didn't, because that's not what they budgeted. Cleveland being cheap is inevitably the reason why LeBron James lost help. So in the end of that offseason, the Cavaliers only get Eric Snow and Drew Gooden. Eric Snow, who's somewhat out of his prime, was just playing with Allen Iverson. He's an okay point guard. And Drew Gooden, who was expected to be a Carlos Boozer replacement, but would never reach the level of production on the level of Carlos Boozer. So the next season comes and LeBron James becomes an all-star. Now the Cavaliers in every right need to hop on this and get it as soon as possible. LeBron James was just in a locker room with Kobe Bryant and elite players at the All-Star game. And we know what happens when you're around elite players. You try to get elite players around you for your own team. However, though, this wouldn't happen. Their lottery pick from that year was trash. Picked over J.R. Smith and any really productive player at all. And one game sums up this season really well for LeBron James. Against the Raptors, LeBron James scores 56 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. And they just so happen to lose. Just another great season wasted because the Cleveland Cavaliers have failed to put support around their superstar. After a 30-20 start, the Cleveland Cavaliers slumped and they didn't make the playoffs yet again. Gordon Gunn in the end of that season was well into his 60s. He was a very old guy. So he reaches out to David Stern and he sells the organization. And they sell it to a guy who's infamously known in Cleveland as one of the worst owners, Dan Gilbert. So in that offseason, they had a boatload of money, $25 million. And, well, to retain LeBron James and try and make sure he signs that extension, they needed to bring in talent. So their first plan of action was Zydrunas Ilgauskas and re-signing him. Zydrunas Ilgauskas was going to go on a vacation, and, well, that was interfering with what time that they had to sign him. So they go, and they quite literally run in the airport and find the 7'3" man, and they intercept him, and they sign a new deal, and it's probably one of the biggest moments of the Cleveland organization up to this point. Retaining LeBron James All-Star Center was probably the most important part of keeping him in Cleveland for that small period of time. So with the rest of the boatload of money that the Cleveland Cavaliers have this offseason, they had some options. They had some really good scoring guards in free agency this year. One being Joe Johnson on the Phoenix Suns, who was rapidly improving as an almost all-star level player. Ray Allen, who would eventually join LeBron James later in his career, but was an all-star level guard at this point in his career playing for the Supersonics, and Michael Redd. Any of these additions would have been beautiful for Cleveland, but the Cavaliers strike out yet again, and they get neither. Both Ray Allen and Michael Redd stay with their own teams to make more money. So the Cavaliers had to sign somebody to try and build around their young talent in LeBron James. So they go for Larry Hughes, who was a very iffy shooter and solid scorer, but he was entering his prime. However, though, most of his days were spent off on the bench as he was a very injury-prone player. Well, then Larry Hughes was the highest paid player on that roster, and they offered him a bigger deal than they did Michael Redd. And then on the other part of free agency, they got Donyell Marshall. No comment needed. In the very next season, he would average his career high in points per game in the season, which was 31. And then he would go to win All-Star Game MVP. And then he would turn 21 and have a party with Lil Wayne. And then he'd drink and he'd do all that stuff. Your star is now becoming a superstar, and it's really getting bad. If you don't get him help right now, he's going to know that he just talked with Lil Wayne, who would recruit him to a different team that is not Cleveland. And from an MVP level season by LeBron James, the Cavaliers were rolling that season. LeBron James has a 37-point triple-double with a game-winning mid-range shot, and shit, that's his 39th win of the season. The Cavaliers will then eclipse 50 wins, and LeBron James is taking this team to another height. So LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers then make the playoffs for their first time since 1998. They secure the 4 seed, and in the first round, they're going against the Washington Wizards in Gilbert Arena. And when LeBron James' first playoff series, he started strong. In the first game, he had 32-point triple-double with 11 assists and 11 rebounds. In his third game, he had 41 points. In his fourth game, he had 38 points. In his fifth game, he had 45 points. And then to close the series out, he had 32 points, shooting 60% from the field. LeBron James started his playoff career on a great note, and, well, the Cavs got past the Washington Wizards. LeBron James' very next series would then play the Detroit Pistons. And, well, against an amazing defensive team, he did pretty well. A fairly efficient 26 points per game with 9 rebounds and 6 assists, and it's still a game. LeBron James lost in the second round, but the future was definitely there for LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So then the offseason comes. Yeah, it was a kind of a sour loss to the Detroit Pistons, but LeBron James signs up for more. Instead of taking his normal 5-year extension, he only takes 3 years. And so does a couple of his friends, Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. So then the offseason comes, and Danny Ferry does minimal things. He gets rid of Flip Murray and gets Boobie Gibson, which was a solid guard, but their youngsters started to step up this year. Boobie Gibson, Anderson Varejao, Sasha Pavlovich, and this season was looking pretty promising for the Cavs. So the season comes and goes, and while Cleveland is still very dependent on LeBron James on offense. However, though Mike Brown has put together an elite defense, and coming into the playoffs, it was looking very promising. This defense would devour opposing scorers, so there was a great chance that they could put together a pretty good run in the 2007 postseason. So the Wizards, the team that they just met recently, they got swept in the first round, completely demolished by the Cleveland defense. The next series, the New Jersey Nets would go out in 6, and Vince Carter would just get swarmed by the Cleveland defense. And all of a sudden, the Cleveland Cavaliers are in the Eastern Conference Finals. So in the Eastern Conference Finals, LeBron James wasn't going to have it easy. Sure, the Pistons were missing their best defensive player, Ben Wallace, but they still put enough wins together to be the 1 seed and still knew how to swarm LeBron James and try and make another Cleveland Cavaliers score that's not LeBron James. And in games 1 and 2, it was beautiful for them. The Pistons could barely score. I mean, their offense was terrible, but they swarmed LeBron James and the Cavs, and they took both of the first games and really set the tone for an amazing series. So fast forward to game 5, and for LeBron James, this is somewhat a legacy game. Winning this game 5 puts him in the driver's seat and a chance to go into the NBA Finals for the first time in his career. Well, LeBron James has a masterclass. LeBron James in this game would score 48 points and shoot really well from the field. But that wasn't even the biggest problem. LeBron James went into overtime 1. In overtime 1, he was the only Cavalier to score, shot 50% from the field and 83% from the free throw line. In overtime 2, LeBron James was the only Cavalier to score, didn't miss a shot from the field, didn't miss a three-pointer, and closed out the game. LeBron James was amazing in this game and was basically his legacy game before all those other seasons of having legacy games. No Cavalier scored in the last 18 game minutes beside LeBron James, and LeBron James delivered. That iconic layup where he split the defense, and now the Cavaliers are up 3-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then comes game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and Cleveland completely swamped the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons lost all their energy from the game before. All this pain and struggle for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the past 30 years, they would make their first NBA Finals. So then comes the NBA Finals, 2007 NBA Finals. And the Cleveland Cavaliers get absolutely fucked by the San Antonio Spurs. So at least the Cavaliers were finalists, right? Going into that offseason, Danny Ferry did virtually nothing. It is depressing. After getting to the finals, yeah, you're finalists in your conference, but if you don't win the championship, you definitely get somebody new. So that offseason, they trade their 1 first-round pick for somebody who never plays again. And then they had trade talks for Mike Bibby, but nothing went through. Well, so what's the problem? The Cleveland Cavaliers just went to the finals. Who cares if they made no moves, right? They were in the NBA Finals the year before. Well, Cleveland was like one of the only teams that stand pat. In the next 3 years, Cleveland would not make the finals yet again. In 2008, the Boston Celtics created Big Three in a super team, which was like unbeatable in 2008. They started off the season amazing, finished 66-16, wasn't really a problem to anybody in the whole playoff race, and won their first championship since Larry Bird. In 2009, LeBron James goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now he's going against the Magic, and LeBron James has a masterclass. 39 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, 59% true shooting percentage, all of that to get beaten 6 by the Orlando Magic. Dwight Howard was feasting on any fucking Cleveland big, and nobody would make a shot that was not named LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers roster. So yet another season of losing. That clock is ticking, bruh. LeBron James' pending free agency is coming in 2010, and in 2009, they just disappointed. They were the favorites in that series, and they just lost because LeBron James' all-star help named Mo Williams was averaging 13 points on 37% from the field. And then 2010 comes. LeBron James leads the Cavaliers to another amazing regular season and wins another MVP after winning MVP in 2009. However, though, it really doesn't mean anything in the playoffs. The second round comes, and the Boston Celtics beat LeBron James and the Cavs yet again. LeBron James cannot outlast 3 superstars, and The Boston Celtics had Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett, somebody who had like a top 8 to 6 peak of all time. So this leads us up to this moment. 2010, the decision. LeBron James has a very charity-funded event, and he has the Boys and Girls Club people sitting there watching the event, and it is in Connecticut, a neutral location, but Cavaliers fans were obviously there and were ready to riot if LeBron James leaves. And we all know what LeBron James did. That was the last time LeBron James took off a Cleveland Cavaliers jersey for the past 4 years.
And this fall, man, it's very tough. And this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.